So you've got a project boat and you're tearing this thing all to pieces, and you're gonna wonder, how in the world do I make sure when I cut the stringers out and the floor out and rebuild it, that the boat has held its shape and I put it back correctly? And so that is what this episode is all about, folks. Now this is episode like 16 of our project boat rebuild. And if you've been following it, you can see that we've rebuilt the console and fixed a bunch of Gelcoat stress cracks, put a new transom in it recently with some Coosa board, and done quite a bit of demolition and foam removal. But if you will notice, we've got some nice straight edges, we've got some levels, we've got some really cool digital tools and kind of old school tools to kind of help you figure out how to keep the boat in the correct shape so that when you rebuild it, it goes back and is good or better than it was originally. So I want to kind of start with what can happen with boats. When you take all the structural members out of the boat, the floor, the bow deck, the rear deck, you kind of get this wobbly, loose shell of a boat, if you will. And there's a lot of movement that can happen. And what you don't want is for the boat to become racked or twisted. So basically, if you imagine the back of the boat and the front of the boat, and basically they're dissimilar to one another, they're twisted. The idea is that you want the front of the boat and the back of the boat and all the running surfaces to remain parallel or stay the way they were from the factory. So if you look inside the boat, you can actually see that we've got a laser level shooting from front to back, and we've got a pretty cool little digital angle finder, if you will. Now this is made by Klein Tools, and you'll see that we're reading a 0-0 right now, which means that the boat is level according to that, and it's also level according to our Stabila traditional level there. And that's a very good one. If you guys are looking for one, I've had these Stabila levels for years and they are very decent, but you don't have to have one, but they've been very good to me. So what we started with, though, to get just a foundation, is I went ahead and we snugged the boat up on the trailer. If y'all follow me up here, I went ahead and wound down tight on this thing, and the way this boat sits on this trailer or loads on the trailer, it kind of pulled it up on the roller a bit and it relaxed the pressure on the bottom. So if you'll look underneath here, we've kind of got this boat where it's just floating. It's floating off of the stringers, if you will, or the supports on the trailer. You can see there's actually a little bit of room there. It's not much, but it's basically floating. Now I have seen videos where people take their boat off the trailer and they block it up and they get real elaborate. But if you can leave it on the trailer, and if you're an average DIYer at home, it would be pretty hard to get the boat off the trailer and get it back on. So I tend to prefer to leave it on the trailer if we can. Now one thing I did do and have done is, you can see we've got some little bottle jacks right here. Now those are just from your standard big box stores. But what I'll do is everything we're using in our videos, I'll be sure to put a video, I'll put a link in our Amazon store, or we have an Amazon store now basically with all the supplies that we're using. And that's a good way for you folks to find what we need or you need conveniently and support the channel. Now the way we were able to get, remember, if you're basically trying to get the back end of the boat level and then get the front end of the boat parallel, and that's where we're using some nice pieces of heavy duty aluminum. And if you look down there, those are nice and straight. Now you can use a 2x4. It doesn't have to be aluminum, but it does need to be a nice straight 2x4 or any other material that you can get that you can span from side to side. Now one thing I did do is, when we were measuring from the very back of the boat, if you notice right here, I've got some marks on the side of the boat. I very carefully used a tape measure and I measured up 15 feet from the back end here, and I made sure that that piece of aluminum was straight and square across the back. And you can make little adjustments. Our little bottle jacks here, now we've got everything lined up, but obviously you could see where you could, if it was a little low, say on the right side or the starboard side, you could give this 1 or 2 pumps, bring that up a little bit. Now one other trick that we've learned over the years is, if the boat isn't sitting level on the trailer, say one side is low or high, just overall, you can actually manipulate the air pressure. So you can add air. If the tires are already inflated, I would just go like if one side is high and they're both inflated, you can use a little drill bit. Just take a little bit of air out of the tires, and you would be amazed how it'll let that side down, or vice versa. You can even add air pressure. So that is kind of how we got the baseline for the back end here. We put our straight edge across the back. We added air or let air out until we got that nice 0-0. Let me turn my little digital. This thing is an amazing little deal. It's an electronic angle finder. Now you do have to be sure that when you put it on your straight edges that you've got it level. If you tilt it, or if it's an angle and your straight edge is an angle, it won't give you an accurate reading. If you look right now, you can see that's 0-0, but if I were to tilt this, it's showing me that this needs to come up. You see the little arrow there, which that's angled down. So when we tilt it forward, it's gonna bring it up back to 0-0. So that means it's level. That is money well spent, and we'll put a link to those as well. A really cool little thing. What's nice about it is that you can set it up, and if you're down here adding air pressure, you can actually see that little gauge as you're adding it, and you know when you're level. So I hope this is all making sense. It may seem a little bit complicated, and it may take you a few hours of kind of just playing around and getting used to it, but just remember using air pressure in the tires to get the back end of the boat level. You need a good straight beam of some kind, or a piece of lumber or aluminum has always worked really good for me. A little digital angle finder is awesome. What I like about these little angle finders too is if you've ever wondered what the dead rise of the bottom of your boat is, which that is from the keel, the middle of the boat, right out to the edge of the boat, we call that the chine. That's the C-H-I-N-E. And if you want to know how much dead rise or angle you have on the bottom, you can see that this little Blazer Bay has 14.3 degrees of dead rise on the bottom. And it's kind of just cool just to be able to know that and find that. You can go to a boat dealership and just check boats you're interested in and see. Now obviously a flat bottom boat would be like a 0-0, and in a deep V boat would be like a 20 to 25 degrees. So like a deep V boat would have like that much angle on the bottom. That's just kind of a cool little knickknack, and I think they're like less than 30 bucks. Now one other thing that is really, really cool, I'm gonna kind of take this Stabila down, but once again, a good traditional level is hard to beat, and that's how I always did it, you know, old school. And you can see that we've got this cross beam positioned. It's in the same position, fore and aft. It's not skewed one way or the other, and we're just looking for nice and level. But the laser levels now that you can get, if you look down here, we've got a little Bosch unit. Matter of fact, let me kill the lights in here for a minute. I hope the GoPro. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Now, if you are laying out, and I hope I'm still showing up, but the laser shows up a lot better. Now, one thing I have learned is you want a green light laser. And again, that little Bosch unit down there was less than $100. And that's something you can use around the house. You can justify, you can help your wife hang pictures and level cabinets and all kind of cool stuff. And it's even shooting a beam. If you look overhead here, you can see it's up on the shop ceiling. And then we're shooting right down through the center of the boat. And I have actually built a little mock-up piece, and we're in the process of getting ready to cut our stringers out. But this is very important, folks. You don't want to go dismantling the boat before you kind of have a baseline. You know where everything is, and you kind of pattern and lay everything out. And I have found that I used to call it blue board. Locally here recently, they used to carry it was the Dow blue board, but what I found at our local Lowe's was not blue anymore, but I went ahead with the 3/4 inch, which is the thickness of the material that we're going to be using. And it's really, really good stuff for templating. If you'll notice down in here, you can see we've made a piece of it, kind of a mock-up of the cross member, which replicates the piece that was in there, but that was obviously plywood before. Most likely we're going back with Coosa on this one, but this stuff is so easy to cut, trim, shape, lay things out, and then you can easily take this material and transfer it to your more expensive composite materials. This stuff's about 20 bucks a sheet, and Coosa is going to be somewhere between $300 and $400 a sheet. It's well worth it, but I would rather practice on the 20 buck a sheet stuff and then transfer your patterns. But the Bosch, this thing is self-leveling. I'm going to turn this off. It's a rechargeable, or it has a couple little AA batteries in there where you folks can, matter of fact, it's even got a magnetic, it's magnetic on the back side, so you can stick this thing to something if you've got something metallic. Right now I've just got it set up with a milk crate in there and some spacers so that we can lay it out as we want to. Now, something else you can do, folks, before you go cutting your stringers out is take real accurate measurements and maybe even make a little, what we call, or I grew up in a boat shop, he called them jigs, where you want to jig or pattern or template something out. And I have done something like this before. Now, you can make these little keyed pieces. They can be different thicknesses. I had considered laminating 2 pieces of 3/4 together and made an 1.5 inch notch there. But what you can do is basically take a 2x4, lay one flat, one vertical, and you can use these little keyed pieces and center them on your existing frames before you cut them out and make marks on the whole side. You would lay everything out so you know exactly where all your pieces were, and then you can use something like this to hold everything vertical and upright. Now, if you were only using 1 piece of 3/4, you would obviously make this narrower. So instead of being 1.5 inches wide, it would be 3/4 of an inch wide, and it would just snug right down on your existing stringer. You'd put maybe some sheetrock screws in there, and then that way when you build your new pieces and they're templated, this will hold everything right back in the same place. Now, something else that I think is very, very important, not only measuring, checking, laying things out, getting everything flat and level, is I don't personally prefer to cut all the stringers and everything out of the boat at one time. Now, that's just me. That's my opinion. I've seen a lot of folks do it. But I think if you cut everything out, you may run a risk of the bottom of the boat changing shape. And I personally prefer to, and I think we're going to do it on this boat, is we're going to take the outside stringers out of the boat and put new ones back in, just lightly tab them in place, and then we're going to cut the inside stringers out and we'll replace those. Then once we get them basically all in place, we'll come back and we'll fiberglass everything really nice and heavy. So that way we're not just completely taking out all the support. It's kind of like for you builders and contractors. I just watched a YouTube video where somebody was working on a load-bearing wall and they didn't support it, and they had a catastrophic things changed on them rapidly. So you want to be sure to try to leave some support in there. Now, something else that you can do just as a visual cue is most boats are going to have some runners down the bottom. They're going to have some spray rails or some strakes. And a lot of times you can kind of just get down there low and eyeball them, and you can get an idea. You know, most of the time they're going to be running quite straight, and I hope the GoPro picks that up. But these spray rails are going to be quite straight typically on the aft end. What you don't want is for there to be a bunch of belly in the bottom of the boat develop after you take the stringers out, or if you've got pressure on the bunks in the trailer and you cut everything out, it'll put what we call hook in the bottom, and that will cause the front of the boat to run really hard downward in the bow, and that's a bad thing. That's not something you want. So I know that's probably a lot of information there, folks. And we are going to be, as we move through this build, I'll be talking about this more, but I'm trying to break up some of these steps in a little bit smaller bite-sized pieces for everybody at home. But I would really recommend a little digital angle finder, about 30 bucks or so. If you can't get that and you got a good level and a couple nice straight pieces of lumber or aluminum, but it's very important to get the back end of the boat level first, and then take a tape measure and carefully measure from, like, say, the face of that, and then carefully measure up and put a mark. And we want to be sure that these are basically parallel to one another. And that's going to be fine for most boats. Now, if you have an ultra high performance boat, something that's going to be going really, really, really fast, the faster a boat runs, the more critical the running surfaces are. But I have found for boats that say run 50 miles an hour or under, for the most part, if you take some of the precautions that we're laying out here, you're generally going to be very, very close, or the change, if there is any, is going to be small enough that there won't be any noticeable effect on how the boat performs and how it runs in its day-to-day use. So I hope that was helpful and informative for you folks at home. Now, if you haven't, or if you're just tuning in and you're new to the channel, my name is Joe Buskins. This is our family's boat shop. I'm second generation professional boat builder and a 100-ton licensed captain. Done hundreds of repair jobs like this, and even folks have been following the channel have seen our 29-footer that we built here in our family's shop from scratch. So this isn't my first rodeo. Done a whole bunch of this kind of stuff. We also recently have added to the Fish Bump TV world, and we have started a group, Facebook group page. It's Fish Bump TV there on Facebook, and you can check us out there. Feel free to share some of your photos and comment, and it's kind of a place for everybody that can meet up and share information about their projects. Check out our Amazon store below our videos, and if you need consulting, you can reach me through Patreon. And that way, you guys, if you need to talk on the phone and you got personal questions or in-depth questions about your personal project, we can speak, exchange pictures back and forth, and that is going to be the route to do that. So Patreon. And with that being said, I want to thank all of our Patreon members and everyone that supports the channel. Thank you so, so much. It's Captain Joe here, my son Logan working hard behind the camera as my amazing cameraman, and we will catch you folks in the next episode.